Great morning. Great morning. So happy to be here with you today. Happy Wednesday. In the world of Utopia, we like to call it a Live Well Wednesday. So we're so thankful that you've decided to join us today for our Utopia talk. Today's topic is cultivating a culture of mindful inclusion, also diversity, equity, and belonging. So I am joined here by a friend, a colleague in the space of coaching, Maria Diaz. Thank you so much for joining us. Maria, tell the world where you are joining us from.
Well, hello, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here with Naya today. And I'm excited about this topic. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And I am joining you all from Barranquilla, Colombia, in South America.
Beautiful. And that's the thing I love. Utopia Global Wellness is all about global citizenship, global community, and global wellness. And, we cannot really have well being without belonging. So, we're here today because we've actually done amazing work in the consulting space together around DEI facilitation with major companies and consulting. And so we know this topic near and dear to our hearts very closely. So I'm so excited about diving into that with you today, Maria. And I will say for anybody that's joining us, feel free to wave to us. Good morning. It looks like CHRO. I hope I said that correctly. Thank you for joining us. Let us know where you're coming from, where you're joining us from. And this is a talk, it's a conversation. So we want to make it engaging, fluid, chime in with your thoughts, what's resonating, and questions. So today's conversation, we're going to dive into really what does it mean to have a culture, especially in the workplace, of inclusion? And how do you get there? What happens when you're not there? And how does it affect associates? How does it affect your talent? How does it affect this walking out, whether it is literally or figuratively, where people are checking out and quiet quitting? So we're going to talk about all of that, as well as some of our personal experiences that really resonate with us and hopefully with you. But a couple of really exciting things. Love to also just introduce us. If it's your first time joining, I'm the founder of Utopia Global Wellness. We are your digital wellness platform that's bringing you globally relevant wellness for the workplace that cultures and elevates cultivates mindful inclusion. And so one of the things that's really exciting about today is we're also announcing our new partnership with United Healthcare. So we are now a partner to United Healthcare. And that means if you are a plan holder, either through your employer, OnePass, or Renew Active, you can now enjoy our programming, our classes live and on demand at no additional cost. So that's really, really something we're very excited about. More to come, and we're having a launch party next Wednesday at 12 o'clock. So check us out at utopiasgw.com for that. And I really feel like today's topic really lends itself to the fact that we now offer group coaching and wellness workshops around these topics of workplace wellness and the whole person and really cultivating belonging. So let's get into it, Maria. Tell us a little bit about, where do we start? I would love for you to start with, let's talk about what is the difference, right, between diversity and inclusion, because some people don't know the difference. What's the difference?
Sure. So, first of all, like I said, thank you so much, Naya, for having me today. And I want to talk about sometimes diversity and inclusion is used in the same sentence as synonyms. And there is a very, very important difference. So, diversity is, if you think of a noun, uh, it is what it is. It's the numbers. Do we have representation? Do we have representation of women, of different underrepresented ethnic groups? Do we have those numbers?
Mhm.
Inclusion is very different, which is, are we creating an organizational culture of support, of respect, of value, where not only do we have the representation and the numbers, but are we listening to the ideas? Do people feel welcome? Do they feel like they can contribute and show up authentically? And that's the big difference. Some of my colleagues like to say diversity is being invited to the dance.
Yeah.
Inclusion is being invited to dance.
You said it.
So are we really leveraging the strengths of our diversity?
And what is it, I think we can both genuinely, authentically just know and connect around the fact that we've been invited to the dance many times. And we were talking about this kind of in our pre-talk, but
Mhm.
not always seeing other people that look like us, not always feeling that there was a genuine intention to connect necessarily or
Mhm.
help to mentor, mold, and shape. And so that is really important. I think that when businesses and organizations don't get that, then as soon as you get the diverse talent in the door, they're looking around and they're saying, wow, am I the only person that looks like me? Most
Mhm.
of my corporate career, that was my story. That was my sentiment. That was my experience. And then you have to wonder, is this a place for me? And are there people in leadership that look like me? Is there
Mhm.
anybody that I can go to that will willingly want to mentor me or sponsor me? So we're going to
Mhm.
talk about all of that. But before we get into all of that, let's get into your story a little bit, right? So
Sure.
tell us a little bit, about your journey in the corporate space as a Latina woman of color.
Mhm.
Just kind of how you navigated and what that journey looked like for you.
Sure, sure. So I have to start, before I start with the journey, I have to start with the generation before me. So both of my parents are from Colombia, South America, and they immigrated to the United States for better opportunity to explore the world. They wanted to live in New York, they wanted to see the world. So, as many immigrant families do, they came to the United States for more opportunity, different perspective, etc. And both of my parents were professionals in their country. My father was a chemical engineer, and my mother was a teacher. But when they came to the States, we're talking about almost 60 years ago, we didn't have the support systems in place. So they worked very honorable jobs. My mother cleaned houses, and my father was a waiter. But they always instilled the value of an education and the value of having agency and ownership over our own lives and our own careers and our own happiness. So that was something, and that's something that I'm going to revisit again as we walk through and as we talk through. But so I was the only kid in the honors classes. I was the token, so to speak. And what I mean by token is I was the only Latina in the space. Uh,
Mhm.
of the honors classes, when in my university classes, in my career, in my master's program, and then that translated over and into the workplace,
Mhm.
especially in leadership positions. As I navigated through, I started in the space of finance, then I went into the space of higher education and training and development, and just navigated through. I worked with Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, National Service, then National Security. So many different areas. Ended up in corporate America, which I enjoy very much, and I work for a large consulting firm where we help with leadership, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and creating those spaces. So, what I want to talk about being the only, I want to talk about a few things around that tokenism and being the only, because we have options. And I think that that's what I really want to make sure that all of us here in this conversation and that are hearing this conversation understand that, am I being honest with myself? Where am I pretending? Am I ready to get in the driver's seat of my career? What do I want? Am I clear on what I want? And this is the very important question is, how am I seeing my diversity?
Mhm.
Am I hiding it?
Mhm.
Am I neutral on it? Or am I seeing it as a strength and leveraging?
Mhm.
For myself, early in my career, I hid, I not that I didn't want anyone to notice. I mean, obviously I'm Latina and my name is Maria Diaz. So there's no mystery there.
Right.
I just didn't want anyone to highlight the fact that I was different. I wanted to, I'm smart like everyone else. I contribute like everyone else. I didn't want to highlight the difference in the beginning of my career.
So you're really trying to more so blend in
Mhm.
than, you did not want to stand out. And I think most of the times we don't, right? But there is, like you said, there's a value that is added by bringing that diversity to the spaces that we enter, the perspective. A lot of times, a lot of lawsuits could have been avoided by having a more diverse perspective at the table, a more diverse point of view. But it is learning how to leverage being sometimes the only. And I think it's a both and. It's not a situation where you can just come in like a bull in a china shop and say, I am. I am the Black woman that you needed on your team or the Latina woman that you needed on your team. And I'm here to present my perspective.
Mhm.
It has to be a both and. This has to be a relationship that the organization also is cultivating to cultivate and foster an inclusive environment as
Yes.
as as
Yeah.
well as owning and bringing it as a gift, the diversity and the perspective that we bring, right?
Yeah, and you mentioned creating an inclusive environment, and of the work that we've done and of the work that I've done throughout my career, there's one thing that I've noticed that people want three things from their workplace.
Mhm.
Uh, of course, above and beyond a paycheck, we all want a paycheck, otherwise it would be volunteering. But after our paycheck, we want three things. All of us, every single one of us, we want to feel respected,
Mhm.
we want to feel valued, and we want to feel
Mhm.
supported
Yeah. Yeah.
in what we're doing in
That's
order to contribute. And
yes.
that is an inclusive environment. I think that sometimes we think that an inclusive environment is only for underrepresented talent, but it's for everyone.
Yeah. It is.
Inclusivity is for everyone, creating that inclusive space where people feel respected, valued, and supported. And we all feel respected, valued, and supported in different ways. But that is creating an inclusive environment.
Right. Right. And let's talk about that. Ways that we can do that, right? Like I agree with you 1,000%. And so I think one of the things being, especially in a hybrid work environment, in a very much virtual work environment, a way that we can ensure that people feel valued, respected, and supported. Simple things to foster a culture of inclusivity, even in meetings, making sure that everyone has an opportunity to be engaged, to be heard. Doing group facilitation, sometimes we have a space that has a lot of extroverts, and it might take a little bit more intentionality to include the voice of the introvert. Because if you only lean on the people that speak up first, then there could be a whole group that's not being heard at all. So it could be inviting everyone to share their thoughts in the chat. It could be going into smaller breakouts. It could be making sure that there is diversity in who is sharing out from their group, not just the person that volunteers, but maybe utilizing different things, whether it is a person who has the most recent birthday or has been on a vacation, just little things like that to make sure that we're hearing the voice of everyone. And that's something that we do at Utopia. We make sure that all team meetings, it is a conversation and that we want to hear from everybody on the call around certain things. And we'll just take the time to hear from everyone. And everyone knows that this is an environment where we value everybody's voice and we want to hear everybody's voice. Of course, you can't do it that way all the time if it's a big, huge, call, but there are other ways. What are some of the other ways that you think that we can foster inclusion?
Sure. I think it's important to recognize that we have, in the last few years, introversion and extroversion in the way that we process information has gotten a lot of attention. But there are also other ways that we process information differently. And we have different work styles. For example, some of us value the task over the relationship. Some of us value the relationship over the task.
Mhm.
So that's a dimension of difference in the way that we process information. Some of us we have different work styles. Some of us we prefer we have different learning styles, and in order to really value all of those perspectives and the way that we process information, the way that we communicate, some of us have different communication styles as well. So in order to value all of these components, I think that the important thing is to create a relationship and know the people that are on your team, whether they're your direct reports, whether you're colleagues, and not just on your team, but across the organization. across, but then also up and down the organization as well. We talked a little bit earlier about the importance of the mentoring, but there's also value in a sponsor. Now, the difference between a sponsor and a mentor is that a sponsor is someone who it has an elevated executive position, and they're able to speak your name in a room full of opportunity.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So those are just some examples, but a way that we can do it is creating those personal connections.
Mhm.
And I want to say a little bit about that, because when we talk about diversity, when we talk about inclusion, we think diversity and we automatically think about race, gender, generation, sexual orientation, gender expression, etc. Those are just above the waterline. That's what we can actually see. But there are so many additional dimensions of diversity, such as religion, that sometimes we don't talk about, we don't think about connecting on. Our parental status
Mhm.
or lack thereof, marital status, our
Mhm.
hobbies, so
Mhm.
many other things that we can connect on. And that's what I invite us to have those conversations when we do connect with others, is find other ways beyond just our physical to connect with each other. I wanted
Yeah.
to, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I love that because there are so many different dimensions of diversity and ways that we do connect. And a lot of times we stop with what we can visibly see, but those visible characteristics may not have nearly as much to do with what we have in common once we get beneath the surface in terms of even questions that we're asking and opening our meetings, having different conversations within our organization, sometimes opening it up. What did you do to refresh and rejuvenate this weekend? Now you opened up the dialogue where people are learning that, oh, I went for a hike. Oh, we went camping. Oh, we traveled to our beach home, or oh, we skied this weekend, or oh, I did a painting class. Now there's all of these opportunities for connection and really finding those connection points of how we belong. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs talks about you cannot, in terms of a major fundamental need, is belonging. And I think that's important for us to really understand that in order to have psychological safety and emotional well being and mental health in a work environment, that sense of belonging must be there. And there's a stat actually by Glassdoor that states that 67% of job seekers, they consider 67% workplace diversity an important factor when they are considering that job. That's almost 70%. That's almost 7 out of 10 people. And more than 50% of current employees want their workforce to increase efforts around diversity and inclusion. And so I want to share this, the impact of what this looks like. So we know a few years ago, Google had a walkout. So women at Google, 20,000 of them walked out the door. That was not to, I would say, I'm sure it did not, Google did not feel like it was to their benefit to have 20,000 associates, news headlines, and all the things. I would say in the long term, it probably was to their benefit because it was a wake up call that some things needed to be different. But companies, you don't want that. Nobody wants that. So it really is the role of each and every manager, leader. Um, you don't have to be a C level, C suite. You don't have to be a director level because we all impact the culture of any place that we enter. I like to say that we are like the thermostat. Any space we enter, we are either increasing the temperature or reducing the temperature. And what does the atmosphere need? So I have been new in a work environment where my colleagues embraced me. They, invited me to lunch. They offered to train me, and I felt a sense of belonging. And it wasn't because we looked alike. It was just because of the spirit of the person. And so even as an associate, you can really elevate the culture of the workplace. Good morning, Clarice. Thank you for joining us. So I wanted to dive in a little bit more, and just in terms of like when we talk about this culture of belonging, if you can share with us, times where you really had to navigate maybe not feeling a sense of belonging and what you did about it, because that's what we also need to talk about, not just the talent side. How do we navigate these situations?
Sure. And I want to go back to an inclusive environment is one where we feel respected, valued, and supported,
Mhm.
and where we make others feel respected, valued, and supported. So I can think of many times where I did not feel respected, valued, or supported in my organization. I want to speak to, and I think we talked about this a little bit earlier. There was a point in my career where I had everything I wanted: the corner office, the bonus, the 6+ figure salary, etc. Everything that I always, everything that I aspired to, everything I wanted to be when I grew up. But my body was telling me otherwise. I was having migraines, I was having anxiety and panic attacks, because I literally thought, I went to the emergency room one time because I was having a panic attack and I thought it was a heart attack, which was really powerful. My body was telling me that something was not
Wow.
going correctly. And I want to say, I want to talk about what was happening in my workplace. In my workplace, I was part of an executive team, which were they happened to be all veterans from the military forces, and I was the only woman on the team, and I was the only ethnic minority on the team as well. Uh,
Mhm.
I felt like I was respected, but
Mhm.
I also felt like there were kid gloves around me, and
Mm.
I wasn't given honest feedback. And that's something that we find in our research when we look at underrepresented talent, that we don't get specific and honest feedback because
Mm.
there's a fear.
Mm.
So asking and giving, so asking for the feedback and then giving honest and specific feedback is really important.
Okay.
So I wasn't getting the support piece. I was getting the respect, but I wasn't getting the support piece.
Right.
So that was creating an environment where I felt like I had to prove myself
Right.
constantly. So I
Right.
wasn't learning, I wasn't growing, I wasn't taking risks because I felt like I was putting in those extra hours because I felt like I had to prove myself constantly.
Mm.
Was it intentional? I don't think it was intentional from any of the leadership or anyone else, but had someone had the conversation with me, made a personal connection, that would have made all of the difference. And when I say the personal connection, I always think about three questions that we can ask, whether it's to a direct report, whether it's to a colleague, etc. What are you working on that you love, that you're excited about? What support do you need?
Mhm.
What's
Mhm.
keeping you up at night? What support do you need? And then the third, but definitely not least, how can I support you in that effort?
I love that.
Those are three questions that we can ask anyone, and they will feel respected, valued, and supported.
Mhm. I love that. Can you repeat those one more time?
Sure, sure, sure. So the first one is, what are you excited that you're working on right now?
Mhm.
What are you excited about that you're working on right now? And they'll share. And then the next one is, well, what's keeping you up at night? What are you concerned about?
Mhm.
And the third, and I would say the third is almost the most important one, is how can I support you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And those three questions really get to feeling respected, valued, and supported.
So that's really powerful. And those are things that can be done at any level, pretty much,
Yes.
right? Like you
Mhm.
can do that at a leadership level, you can do that as a colleague level, you can do that as a project manager level, and you can do that at the highest levels of leadership. I want to go back to when you said that there were times that you felt high levels of anxiety in your workplace, even though you seemed like you had it all, and to the point where you thought you were having a heart attack. And I think that that's something that we should talk about, the impact and the implications of what, workplace stress can do to us and how it can manifest itself in our bodies. And a lot of us have felt this, whether it's from stress and workloads to not feeling a sense of belonging and inclusion. You also talked a little bit about, maybe not feeling safe to take risks. And I think that that's something that does happen a lot when you do feel like you are one of the few or one of the only ones. You talked earlier about the tokenism. Do you feel supported enough to take risk, to leap out? And so I want to say, in helping to foster inclusion for yourself as well, is having what I would call coaching conversations with your leadership. So when you're having your one-on-ones, make sure that those conversations are fruitful. And even if you're not being asked, because sometimes you don't have a manager or a leader that is intentional or thinking about asking these things. You and I have done enough coaching work that we know that sometimes we're coaching leaders and managers on how to really cultivate that environment. So you can also drive the coaching conversation by saying, these are some of the things that I would love to work on as a stretch goal. And I would love your support in these stretch goals. Who else do you think I should meet in the organization? Would you be willing to introduce me? Because oftentimes, when you do feel like you're one of the only ones, it can feel lonely. And sometimes we have to be the ones that are initiating that next step of engagement and pursuing it a little bit and asking for the support that we need. I would say we almost always have to do that, right? And so that way we can start to cultivate the inclusive environment that we desire to have, and taking that step to spearhead that a little bit when it's not naturally happening in the way that we think it should be happening. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah. I want to speak to something where you said, if it's not naturally happening. Usually in a workplace, we all have key performance indicators that we're responsible for. We have departmental goals, we have team goals, and the manager is focused on performance. Everyone, and it depends on the organizational culture, but most organizational cultures are focused on performance. So there's so much to do, not enough time in the day.
Mhm.
So taking that pause during the one-on-ones, during the check-ins, to really ask for what you need, and this is from an individual looking. If you're not getting what you need in terms of respect, value, and support, asking for what you need,
Mhm.
and really being clear. And I want to go back to taking that agency for the individual, because there's some things that we can control, there's some things that we cannot control, but taking that time to pause and reflect and think about, what do I really want? What do I not want within my career? What am I willing to give up? What effort am I willing to put forward if this is something that I want? You talked about those stretch assignments. This is how we're able to grow, is we're taking those risks. Not too much of a risk where we're going to fail, but enough of a risk where we can learn and we can get feedback from it.
Mhm.
Now, I want to say something about that opportunity, that growth opportunity, is to be really clear on not only taking that stretch assignment, asking for the stretch assignment, but this is one where we have a tough time. And we find across the research that with women and ethnic minorities, we have a hard time communicating our successes and our wins.
Why is that?
I'm going to say that again because we talked earlier about not wanting to stand out. We think that and this is again socialization, this is what our research supports as well. Our experiences have been that when we go in, we just want to put our head down and I will be recognized for my work. I'm just going to go in, do check off all the list of all the requirements and my job description, and then I will be recognized and I'll be promoted and I'll get what I want for my career. But
Mm.
that's in real life, realistically, that's not how it happens. How it happens is that you have to highlight and communicate your successes, your wins. If you do take those stretch assignments, what you're doing, because we talked earlier about the priority of your manager are those performance goals. Yes, they're responsible for your development, but you care more about your development than they do.
Yep. So I want to lean into that. So there is a book that I read that I love, Carla Harris, Expect to Win, and she talks about her journey, as a, I would say, beginning career woman on Wall Street. So she's Harvard grad. So obviously this lady is a powerhouse and brilliant. And so she wasn't speaking up in meetings. And she talks about this in Expect to Win. And she heard someone say, "Is Carla Harris stupid or something? She never speaks up." So what an assumption. So one, I want to say, let's check our assumptions. Let's do that. But she heard that and she was just really just bummed out. And so what she decided to do was start speaking up more. But she was fearful. She was fearful that if she said something that wasn't right, that wasn't well received, what was the impact going to be? Because the pressure is higher. And I want to personally take a moment to empathize with that the pressure is higher, the stakes are higher. And not always feeling supported is my lived experience. So I understand that. But you do have to take the risk to get the reward, to see if this is an environment that is going to be able to support you in your career growth, right? And so she had another conversation with one of her managers about a position that she wanted. He said, "You're not tough enough." Assumptions made. So what she started doing is she started to introduce herself. She started to speak up more in meetings. She started to take that risk. She started to introduce herself as, "I'm Carla Harris and I'm tough." And she said she was walking down the hall and there was a group of people, colleagues behind her. They did not know that that was Carla. And they said, "Have you met that Carla Harris? I hear she's tough." And so I love that, because when we think about, elevating our professional brand, our personal brand, how are we showing up? Are we showing up with confidence? Are we showing up knowledgeable? Are we showing up in a way where people see us as capable? Because we could be 1,000 times capable. Like Maria said, sometimes we come in and think, "I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to get there on time. I'm going to stay late, and I'm just going to do the work." But relationships matter, and so does perception. And the beautiful thing about perception in our brand is that we can always do things to change it and to elevate it. So if you're not happy where it is today, you can do something about that. And so I love when she talked about her journey. And now, goodness, like she is not only an executive and board member on Wall Street, but she also is an opera singer and all these other things. And so she also learned how to bring more of her full self, which gets into that how we connect with others, because she says that she will share more about herself, about her opera singing, her family, different ways that she knows that she will connect, because just doing the work is not enough. It's about also the relationships. The relationships matter, the sponsorship. Who is going to speak your voice in that room, in that closed door room? I have an extensive background in global talent acquisition. So I would facilitate a lot of debriefs around who's going to get hired. And a lot of times it comes down to who felt that they connected with you. And sometimes in tech, it was just who was a gamer. It wasn't always who had the best credentials. It was who did they connect with and feel like they would want to work with every day. And so I want to say too that ways that employers can make sure that they are fostering an environment of inclusivity is really making sure that you're holding leadership accountable, having really some clear goals around inclusion, diversity, and equity. And there is a difference between equity and equality. But if the company doesn't make this a priority, then don't expect for your leaders to just wake up and decide it's a priority, because they do have a lot on their plate. They do have a lot to do, and this should be one of the priorities. Also, recognizing when there is bias is really important, and practicing and modeling inclusive leadership and making sure that you're getting different perspectives from different people, and it's not always the go-to person. Because if we're honest, a lot of times within teams, there's a go-to person. And so how do we broaden the opportunity for other people to have input in those environments? And then providing sponsorship programs. So there are literally programs for talent to have someone to mentor them and to sponsor them and to really cultivate a relationship so they know what this person, in ways this person can add value to the organization, and really have that formal relationship. And sometimes they're informal. I've had informal sponsorships that have really opened up doors for me. And so from the talent side, you can cultivate these relationships by doing check-ins and giving updates. What have you accomplished? What would you like to learn more of? But sharing those highlights in those updates. And that's something that we've talked about a lot, I think, in the consulting space.
And I want to say something about brand, because it's sometimes there's a lot of we hear a lot about professional brand, and some people and perception, and the importance of perception and brand. And when we think about brand, everyone has a brand.
Yeah.
Yes, even you, whoever it is that's listening to this, you have a brand. The question is it a brand that you own? and does it represent what what experience, value, and expertise you bring to the table? And I want to highlight that because when we talked earlier about in the conversation, we talked about, are you hiding your diversity? Are you neutral on it? Or are you leveraging it as a strength? And I talked earlier in my career where I felt like I had to prove myself, and I was neutral. And if anything, I didn't want to bring any light to the fact that I was different. My ethnic background, my Latina-ness, I didn't want to bring it up. But I would say in the last 5 years, and so many social justice things have happened in our country and globally, but particularly if we look at George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and the Black Lives Matter movement and all of these social justice movements that have heightened our awareness around inclusion and around social justice. They've It's almost like there's an increased value in diverse perspectives and in diversity. And that's part of communicating brand as well, is what unique expertise and experience and perspective can I bring to I do come from a different culture. I come from an additional culture. 26 countries around the world speak Spanish. I speak Spanish. So I'm able to leverage, in addition to all of my other expertise, in addition to my business acumen, in addition to my marketing, to my finance background, to my operations background, to my learning and development and leadership background. In addition to, I can also offer that expertise on the Latino, Hispanic, Latinx, Latina culture. So those are ways where we really look at how can we leverage our diversity and bring a different perspective to the table.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's powerful. And I think it's also powerful in even being able to help other talent kind of leverage these spaces in these waters. And I remember, in I would say our pre-talk, we were talking about this topic and you were sharing that there was a role where it did make you feel physically ill, just the stress levels of it all, right? And that what did you say? Tell us about that story a little bit.
Sure. Yes, sure. So I was at the top of my game again, working crazy hours. I had on paper, my life looked great. But I was having these I was having these panic attacks, etc. I went on vacation and I just took some time to pause and to escape and to reflect and to really elevate my connection with myself. I had 3 young children at the time. I didn't know what their favorite colors were. I didn't know what they wanted for breakfast. I connected with myself. I connected with them. And I connected with my spouse and my partner. When I came back I was gone for 2 weeks in a very secluded place in South America, in nature, just disconnected from everything. And when I came back on the airplane ride, I was talking to my partner and I said, "Hey, can we make it financial if I quit my job?" And he said, "Yes, just stop shopping." So when I stepped into my office, I decided to resign from this position that I wanted my whole life. I decided that it was time to not give the best of myself to my work, but to offer it and give it to my life, and to create the life that I wanted. And some of my direct reports came in, particularly Latinas, came in to my office and they said, "Maria, you can't leave. We want to be where you are." And the answer that I had for them is, "I'm going to move over so that you can step in." And when we think about, at the time I meant it, and I want to say something about leaving the organization. Had I had the tools, the expertise, and the knowledge that I have now around inclusivity, around advocating for myself, around creating a culture of inclusion, communication, etc., I could have stayed and created a more inclusive environment as a leader within the organization. But I did not have those tools available at the time. Um, so it's interesting, the mindset at the time that I had, that there was just enough room for one of us in leadership, and that I had to move over for them to be able to move in. So again, when, as Maya Angelou says, when we know better, we do better.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and I want to offer those tools now to our listeners is, we can take control of our careers. We can create inclusive environments so that we don't lose talent. We can help for everyone in the organization, whether we're in a leadership role or not, for everyone to feel respected, valued, and supported. But also we can advocate at leadership levels to change the structure and the infrastructure of the organization for more inclusivity.
I love that. And thank you for sharing that story. And it's a powerful story. And I think it was great to learn that part of your story, just recently. And it resonates because I think that for underrepresented talent groups that, you can see the underrepresentation physically. A lot of times we do think that there's not space for others. And so we don't always think that we can stay and move up and have others that we can help to move up to. And I think that that is a mindset that is pervasive amongst a lot of different groups. And I know that it is pervasive within the Black and African American community at times as well. And I think it's something that is powerful for us to take a moment to unpack, because if we do, and we have to make these decisions for ourselves. So it sounds like this was absolutely the right decision for your life holistically at the time. Physically, relationally, for your family, it sounds like it was the right thing, right? But at the same time, I want us to think about having a seat at the table. And a lot of times, if there's no representation at the table, then we can't really expect for things to be different. One of the things that I feel it was one of my proudest, aside from being an entrepreneur, one of my proudest accomplishments in a corporate space was helping to stand up and lead an ERG while I was at Red Hat. That ERG is still thriving. It's called Build, and that stands for Blacks United in Leadership and Diversity. And it did give me a sense of community. While I didn't have a lot of people within my team that felt could understand necessarily my journey in the same way, I did have a community within the workplace that I still am in community with. I was just on a call. I serve on a board that I started with another leader at that time. And so we still are in community with. So there are other ways too that not only can companies, but associates can really, again, cultivate a sense of community and inclusion by becoming involved in different things. And that was something that I didn't just become involved in my ERG. I started becoming involved in leading mindfulness and finding a lot of different ways that I connected. And I was able to create a lot of valuable relationships throughout the organization, which positioned me for success, growth, and further relationships that I still have to this very day. I want to share this too, in terms of feeling supported or feeling what we need. And sometimes when we don't, we do leave. And I will say that women have left the workforce in droves through the pandemic. And part of offering an inclusive environment is that flexibility, is the hybrid work environment, and all of those different things. But 50% of women reported experiencing microaggressions, and 14% experienced harassment in the last year. 93% of them think reporting non-inclusive behaviors will impact their careers. So there's so much that's happening that's not being reported. And what happens is people do leave. Women of color are the fastest growing population, specifically Black women, of entrepreneurs, the fastest growing population of entrepreneurs. When you look at the spending power of minority dollars, it is tremendous. And so when you lose that talent, what's happening is you're not necessarily knowing how to brand, to market, to speak the language to the very consumer that you may really be trying to receive. And this is on every level. And this is why I was fueled to start Utopia Global Wellness, is not just from my perspective, but working in global talent. I realized that for global companies, a lot of times when I was talking to talent, I would hear them say, we say we're a global company, But I feel like we're just so North American centric. I don't really feel that this company represents me or speaks to me or cares about me, even though we have offices in 85 countries. We don't feel that it's global. And I said, wow, this is not something that just I feel. A huge part of the workforce feels in various dimensions of diversity. So we talked about race, religion, ethnicity, gender, age, abilities, so many things that we can see and can't see. There are, from a neuro perspective, there are things that we don't see, that we don't even know. There are plenty of people that we work with, and we don't even know that there could be, some other things that they're challenged with, what make everyday work a little bit more difficult, that we need to lean into. And how do we know this? By creating more space for more inclusive conversations and really hearing the heart of our associates and hearing the brilliant ideas that they also have.
Thank you so much, Naya, for sharing all your just your expertise and just your knowledge in this area. And I want to highlight a few things.
Mm-hmm.
So the importance of community and validating our experiences. So that's essential. ERGs, you mentioned them, they're employee resource groups within organizations where if there's an affinity that you want to connect with, you want to connect with other colleagues, then you can connect, and that's a resource that the organization can put forward and can offer for community, for a sense of community. We also talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And when we're in survival mode, so that's when we're trying to prove ourselves and we feel like the only, and we feel isolated, then our behaviors are going to reflect that survival.
Yeah.
We're not going to want to take those risks. We're not going to have, come up with those great ideas. We're not going to contribute in the way that we can contribute our perspectives, our ideas, our concepts to the organization, because we are in survival mode.
Yeah.
We're not going to help others and lift others.
There you go.
Whereas when we feel like we belong and we have a sense of self-awareness and of growth and actualization, then we are willing to take those risks. We're willing to come up with those new ideas. We're willing to share. We're willing to take a seat at the table. We're willing to mentor and sponsor others as well. So I want to really highlight that. The other component is I want to talk about the importance of world citizenship and global citizenship.
Absolutely.
Especially now after the pandemic, now that there's so many hybrid different work styles and virtual, etc. The world has opened up. The world has definitely opened up in many different ways, particularly for more of the corporate positions in global organizations. I'll use myself as a very vivid and a very real example. The life that I wanted to create was a life where I could have the best of both worlds. I'm out of Miami, Florida. So I have a home in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where I grew up and where my family is. But my roots are from Colombia, South America. So I share time between Colombia, Barranquilla, Colombia, and Coral Springs, Florida. So I'm able to share that time and go back and forth, best of both worlds, based on this global citizenship, this global perspective that we're able to offer. So when we're able to do that, people can show up more authentically. They can share their ideas, their concepts, and it adds value to the organization, period. It adds value to the organization. But sometimes there are barriers to inclusion. We haven't talked too much about those, but I do want to talk about barriers to inclusion. Unfortunately, they're all unfortunate, because inclusion, the definition of inclusion is helping everyone, not just underrepresented talent, but everyone feel valued, respected, and supported so that they can do their best work. I'm going to say that again. Valued, respected, and supported everyone so that they can do their best work and contribute.
Absolutely.
Period. That's it. There's nothing else attached to it. Unfortunately, some barriers are that in this the political divide, particularly in the United States, has added political views to inclusion, where it's not. There's no there. If we really look at the definition of inclusion, it's who doesn't want to feel respected, valued, and supported in the workplace? Everyone does.
Mhm.
So I really want to highlight that
And feeling safe. It also means feeling safe and feeling welcome in the workplace. And we should all feel safe in the workplace.
at least, right? At least safe
Mhm.
in the workplace so that we can do our best work. So I know that we're wrapping up, we're coming towards the end, but I really want to, first of all, thank you um,
Thank you.
for inviting me to this conversation. And I want everyone to have an opportunity to reflect on, are you creating an inclusive environment in your workplace? Period. Are
Mhm.
you asking people how they're doing? Are you asking people what they're excited about, what they need some support with,
Mhm.
what's worrying them?
Mhm.
Um, are we helping others to feel respected, valued, and supported? And are we asking for what we need as well?
Yeah, yeah. And at the end of the day, we benefit greatly by diverse perspectives, by diverse competencies, by just having, different voices and perspectives. I learned so much from my team by asking their thoughts and some of the most brilliant ideas. And this is something that you hear a lot in the tech space is that collective thought is highly valued because it fuels innovation. And so if you want to be the more innovative company, you're going to really invite inclusive perspectives because you want to know what others are thinking and feeling and how does it really affect them. And so it also drives diverse culture. And that's the richness of the world that we live in. Like you said, we're in a more global society than ever before, which is the beauty that came from COVID, is that the physical barriers didn't matter as much for a little while. And then the talent pool opened up globally. Well, how do we make sure that your talent, that your organization allows everybody to feel valued, respected, supported, welcome, and safe? And that's what we want to do. So I want to give you all, we'll get ready to close out. I want to give you 1 minute. This is the coaching question for you. Go ahead and write down, what will you start or stop doing to cultivate a more inclusive environment? Will you reach out to a new colleague? Will you start speaking up more? Will you ask maybe the folks that you're not hearing from as much their thoughts and perspectives? What will you do to drive and cultivate a more inclusive culture? We'll give it 1 minute. Solomon, thanks for joining. Can DEI be submersive to minority startups by allowing for possible leveraging of majority into minority spaces? Yeah, I would say kind of a flip.
What's the question?
It says, can DEI be subversive to minority startups by allowing for possible leverage of majority into minority spaces? I don't think I fully understand the question either. We might have to go back to that.
Yeah, I don't think I think I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm not.
I'm not sure I fully get the question. But does anybody, if anybody has come up with something you want to share in terms of what you can do, what you will do, what you will start and stop, go ahead and throw it in the chat. Also, if you have any additional questions for us, sorry, we're not following your question.
Yeah, and if you can add more, elaborate a little bit more on your question, that would be great. That way we could actually answer it.
Can DEI leverage majority actors into minority spaces? Well, what I hear is there a space for maybe majority associates, people, actors to be brought into minority spaces? And I think that all fosters inclusion. I think every environment values from a bit of diversity and inclusion. So I would say keeping an open mind, as Bobby says underneath, that there is strength in diversity is really the value and the perspective. Keeping an open mind and realizing that there is value in diverse perspectives. and experiences. And you can't always look at a person and know what their diverse perspective is and their experiences. It really comes from taking time to unpack and learn and hear and listen. So I would say that would be, one of the ways that I would answer that question.
I wanted to because there's something that we haven't talked about yet is we talked about adding diverse perspectives, creating an environment of inclusion,
Mhm.
psychological safety, what that looks like, respect, value, and support. But
Mhm.
when we talk about being more inclusive and being more diverse, um, we really want to challenge how we are measuring the criteria and qualifications for a position or to come into the organization.
Mhm.
Is it really necessary that we recruit from, I'll give a specific example. Do we need Ivy League? Is that what we need for this particular, because that's one perspective. But
Can I just can I just share? You just you just brought up something for me. Go ahead,
can
finish,
we
and then I have to share.
benefit? So can we benefit? Because if we look at pipelines, what's the pipeline to Ivy League? And what perspective are we getting from Ivy League? I'm not saying anything against Ivy League. Most Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies recruit from Ivy League, but what perspectives are we missing out on by not going to the state schools, by not going to the community colleges? Now I know what many of you may be thinking, but wait, we don't want to lower the bar. Let me not just even go there. It's a different perspective.
Let
It's a
me share.
different
Let me
perspective. So please,
I would
please go ahead. Go
and
ahead.
I'm mindful of your time because we can't keep a lawyer all day, but this is a good conversation. But I have to share this. So while I was recruiting for a major company, and I will not share a name, I was asked to lean in, and I supported the whole organization, very large global organization, but I was asked to lean in to help with some of the intern recruiting. And I love working with college students. And so I said, sure. And so one of the positions was on the legal team. This is an internship. Just want to make sure we noted that. And one of my colleagues really got a little bristly with me because I was submitting a candidate slate of qualified interns. And he said, no, they will not want to see people that did not come from this school, this school, this school. And I said, excuse me, as an HR professional, it is my duty to be ethical and not discriminatory and to submit every candidate that is qualified. So in every job description, there are requirements and qualifications. And what school is discriminatory? Just so everybody knows this, is discriminatory, and it's not ethical. And so I said, no, I will not do that. Long story short, this intern was not only hired, but I had to be willing to have those kind of bring my diverse perspective to the table. And I went to a HBCU, and I'm very proud of that. And that my colleague was going to disqualify this candidate. So thankfully, I was in this position to make a difference in this way. Not only did he do a phenomenal job, they wanted to hire him, but I think he may have felt some of the residue of that and decided to go work for an international law firm and is doing extremely well. But I want to say that you're absolutely right. So we need to look at all of the biases along the way and look at what we're really, and when I would hold debriefs, I would say 3 questions. Is the qualified based on your interview and their background? Do they have the experience? Will they add value to this team in the areas of skill that's needed? Because a lot of times we don't need more of the same. We need something that's a little different, right? And do they align? Not are they a culture fit, because culture fit means there's no room for anything that's unique, diverse, different. Do they
Mhm.
align with the corporate values? So if that is innovation, if it's collaboration, if it's what are the values? So I was intentional about keeping my hiring managers and decision makers focused on what really matters. So I hope that you all will take that and be focused on what really matters. So we are at time. I just want to invite you all to do a nice cleansing breath as we close out. Maybe you close your eyes, maybe you lower your gaze, and take in a nice cleansing breath, placing one hand on your heart, one hand on your abdomen. And I want you to think about, what will you do today to create more diversity, inclusion, and equity in your workspace. I'll share this quote. The diversity in humanity should be the cause of love and harmony, as it is in music, where many different notes blend together in making a perfect chord. Abdul Baha. Thank you so much for joining us today. Maria, thank you for joining us from Colombia. I'm coming to visit you.
Literally, she is.
I am, literally I am. And we'll do a Utopia talk from there. And so emotional intelligence is so important. Yes, it is. So if you would like to learn more and even schedule a discovery call with Utopia, go to utopiasgw.com, and I will also make sure all of that good stuff is in the link in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us today, and make it a Utopia living day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.